All right. We are honored to have Juan O Savin join us this evening. So, Juan, thank you for making time, buddy.
Hey, always enjoy it.
So, I have been lucky enough to follow Juan for, gosh, it's going on now 3 years. And I can't even guess how many times you've spoken with folks across the country trying to shed a little bit of light and maybe some insight into the shenanigans and seeming chaos we've found ourselves in. So what I thought we'd try to do is spend a little bit of time. I bet people would love to know kind of how this started for you, because I think it's starting for a lot of people now. They see things that I refer to them as they don't fit. And so maybe you could kind of share where you came from some quite a number of years ago, I understand one.
Well, even at a very early age, I was around um, some of the long in the tooth guys at that time, 60s and 70s, that were having questions about the way our government was operating, the people that were in power. Obviously, for many of them, the era that really changed a lot of these people was. I remember talking with one of the farmer that I bought one of my farms from. He was a Korean War vet, and he was a pretty mellow guy. He grew up on a farm, had never in his life been more than 20 miles from the farm that he grew up on. And he had kind of a rough upbringing in the sense that when he was 9, his mother had been abandoned by the husband during the Depression, and she just couldn't take care of him. There was another guy that was interested in her, and he already had a child himself and didn't want some other guy's kid in his house. So the mother took my friend, 9 years old, down the street to a dairy where the people, a couple, had a small dairy, and they let him live in the milk house, in a little office on the side of the milk house. And my friend says, that office was about 6 feet by 9 feet.
Oh, wow.
And he made a place for a bed out of springs. He put hay on it, literally, and a blanket over the hay, and that was his bed. And he lived there till he was went to the military. He was 17 when he enlisted, and the day of his 18th birthday, he was in boot camp. And he ended up in Korea.
Hmm.
And the experience of Korea, what he had heard and the papers and everything else and the newsreels in those days that they had and what he experienced didn't really, it didn't prepare you for the grind that was there. And when he came back, he never could trust or believe anything he read in the papers. He couldn't let his guard down mentally. And he, at one point, had made a vow to one of his friends who was killed beside him that he would, figure out why this happened and try to, not let it happen to anybody else like it happened to them in the future. And he talked about, the cold. And when his friend was killed, the blood freezing beside his friend's body after it poured out, and he had to stay there because they were bogged down where they're at. And it was pretty gripping. I mean, it was very heartfelt. He says, I never even talked about this with any of my family, but you got to know this stuff because the people that are running this world are, they're scary people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Here we go. All right, we're back.
all right. Yeah, I had a cell signal lost there, and it didn't come back for quite a bit. I think it may have been even a site being repaired or whatever. There's not that many up here, so
Well,
couldn't
you got
hand it
one
off
hell of a
between them.
view now. That's makes up for it,
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you can see it's pretty
Gorgeous.
nice out here, so a lot of
You
fun.
bet.
Let me get a cup of coffee, that's for sure.
There
You
you
know,
go.
so my buddy, he actually became a fairly well-to-do farmer and learned the dairy cow business, uh, from a very young age, and so that laid the groundwork for him to do pretty well over time in his life. But he would hear something in media, see something in media, and instantly be very guarded about whatever he heard. He was one of the few guys that from the beginning, um, uh, this is going to sound weird to most people to hear this. He never trusted Walter Cronkite,
Hmm.
and when the assassination happened, he says too made up. He was like he was almost prepared to do what he did that day. It looks so Hollywood. You think it's a certain way, and he never bought it. I was like, gosh, I see nothing but sincerity there. And he said, nope, nope, that's a good actor. And it would bother me. It would pain me to hear him talk like that at the time, early on. Um, Later, when the moon landings happened, he was a guy that had said, don't believe a word of it. I don't trust any of those guys. It's made up. Not that we couldn't get there if we wanted to, but we didn't get there in 9 years. And pretty smart guy, never finished high school, had, never got through junior high school. I believe he got to seventh grade. That's all he got. And, but smart enough to become a multimillionaire many times over and see how the world worked. And I think back to a lot of the stuff that he said and his way of viewing things. Um, and I don't know that I can disagree with him like I used to back when. Um, uh, and even today, with what we know of the media now, we had a number of these people that have come out and talked about in their memoirs and things like that they were on the payroll of three-letter agencies, that they had, even while they were doing the broadcast news and stuff like that, and were being given the news stories and how to say them and coached through it and all that. And so, even today, look what's going on in the Ukraine. The way that we were sold a bill of goods about why we had to support Ukraine, not just after Russia came in, but remember, for 10 years, 10 years before Russia came into the Ukraine, World Economic Fund and other groups had poured $10 billion into fostering an Orange Revolution, a civil war in the Ukraine, in the Donbass region. And uh, all of the corruption that went there with Biden going over and shutting down an internal investigation about money and payoffs and stuff like that, all of the Burisma money going out through the various crime families here in the American political system and uh, funneling it through Ukraine. So is that war there legitimate? Look, I do not want, I wouldn't want to live under Russian authorities. I wouldn't want to live under Putin. Um, he may be uh, viewed by many as, the second coming of a good guy over in Russia. He's not. From a, say a Christian perspective, he had his girlfriend get an abortion a year and a half ago. Um, he goes down to Greece and the Orthodox Church lets him sit in the high holy seat and pontificate, and he's all wonderful and everything else. Russian Orthodox Church, etc. He's kissing up to mothers and grandmothers, and he's got good PR people that know what people want to hear. He certainly is absolutely better in the way that the governance has occurred in Russia than the old Soviet Union. Soviet Union's gone. Thank God. Thank Reagan and the people around him with the foresight to put an end to the Cold War. But Russia is still a very messed up location. Love the people of Russia. Oh my gosh. The people out of Russia are very similar to us in so many ways. We are natural allies, Russia and the United States, but they've been heavily twisted, tweaked, controlled by, forces globalista trying to take the world in a different direction using Russia as their puppet. And the only thing I would say to Americans, look, I bleed red, white, and blue. But the things that have been done in the name of the American people, using American government assets, taxpayer money, resources, our military, there's some pretty egregious crimes that have occurred that are pretty hard to justify. And so our government's out of control. You can say, well, Putin and Russia are out of control. Okay, well, what's under control with our government, with our DC operations? It's insane, insane.
As we learn more about what the three-letter agencies have done for certainly my lifetime and probably a lot longer than that, every time we find something, it seems more and more nefarious. I grew up thinking that the U.S. was the best place, best people, best government on the planet, and the more we learn, the more it throws in questions about our own conduct, the conduct not of the people, as you say, but the government agencies that have been telling us, "Oh, we're doing this all for, protect the rights of people all across the country or all across the world." The more you find out, the less that looks like what they've actually been doing.
Well, it's a captured operation. The American people are a beautiful people. But let me use an example. I can stitch it together so it makes sense to people. We have a constitution. The constitution is the law of the land. It is the contract between the American people and the people who would govern America. It's the rules by which we live and interact. There has to be, certain guidelines, a basis for coming together and working and living together. It's the fundamentals of society. So, to the extent that the Constitution is followed, that everybody is mutually on the same turf, same ground, then things work pretty good in America and have worked pretty good. To the extent that it's deviated from or ignored, things start to become unwieldy, and there's problems between the states, between the citizens in the states, the citizens in their federal government. So an example is 50 years ago, over 50 years ago, Roe versus Wade became the law of the land. And it was determined that the federal government, not the states, had the right to essentially legislate that all states had to allow abortions, and it was under federal control. Then last year, the Supreme Court revisited the issue. Now, in the intervening years, numerous cases had gone through the court systems, and each time the courts had either decided not to hear them or decided to, keep Roe versus Wade in place, even though it was later determined that the basis for the whole case was a fraud. The woman that was involved came forward and told that there was fraudulent things in the basis of the case, things like that. But it remained the law of the land. Last year, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, in the finding, the decision, Justice Thomas wrote the decision, and he said that an earlier court erred in its judgment. erred in its judgment about what? The Constitution, whether or not it was lawful, whether or not it was um, a correct interpretation of the Constitution to say that the law of the land could, in this particular subject, could be administered at the federal level, and found that the federal government did not have the legal authority to legislate abortions nationwide. It was a states' right issue. So that earlier court was really a captured court. It was what was called an activist court. And it was doing all sorts of things on numerous subjects that were, they were legislating from the bench, and people commented on it, showed all sorts of information about it over a period of time. But nobody got in the way of them and stopped them in that time period. So in Justice Thomas's ruling, he also said that there was other cases that similarly had been decided in an unconstitutional way, that were out of alignment with the Constitution, and cited that they needed to be revisited also. You go to what was going on with money going to the Ukraine, going to World Economic Fund to go to Ukraine, money going to Iran, and then investigations not going into where that money was going to and how it was being funneled back through crime families in the political system here in the U.S. Are we going to come back later on at some later point in time and find out a later court says, gosh, these courts erred, or these politicians erred, did things outside the Constitution? I'll use another example. In the vote fraud stuff, Ken Paxton with Texas led a number of states challenging 6 states, I believe it was, on whether or not they had conducted a legal vote in the 2020 election based on their own internal state laws, and showed that those 6 states had not followed the law within their own states about how elections needed to be conducted. An example is Wisconsin. They had drop boxes which did not have a chain of custody, and allowed just anybody to throw ballots in there, really, and without any validation that they were legitimate ballots. So other cases like Pennsylvania, 58 out of the 67 counties in Pennsylvania had more votes by a significant number than there were registered voters in those 58 counties. In a normal election year, getting a turnout during a presidential election, which is when most people come out to vote, the highest percentage of voters come out to vote. Usually the highest you get turnout, even in a presidential election year, is about 60% of the voters. So in Pennsylvania, they were having 105, 110, 115, 120% turnout. In other words, that's an impossibility. In reality, probably double the number of legitimate voters, ballots were cast for double that number. Every time a ballot's cast that's not a real voter, it cancels a real voter. And so did the presidential election go for Biden, or did it go for Trump? And how would you get to the bottom line of it? Texas sued and said that these states who did not follow their own state laws, their vote needs to be not included in the national vote till they've cleaned it up, rectified it, corrected it somehow. The Supreme Court said, with Texas and these other states that came with it, said that they did not have jurisdiction in the matter. Well, who would have jurisdiction in a matter between states? So those votes were included in the national tally, even though other states were protesting. You can't include it because it's not a legitimate vote. Are we going to find out in the court cases that are working their way through right now, 2, 3, 10 years from now, 50 years from now? Will writers be writing about the fact that the court failed to do its job? The Supreme Court failed to hear cases where it did have a legitimate authority, and in fact were the only authority set up by the Constitution to review these matters, and that they neglected to do their job. They failed to do their job, a sin of omission. And it's too bad, because Biden was put in office, stayed in office his whole term, did all sorts of things that Trump wouldn't have done. And we find out later that Trump won the election, but never got to hold his office. And all the things that were done by Biden that have taken the economy down, left the border naked, wide open, sent money to Iran and Ukraine, Hamas, all these things, allowed Afghanistan to, literally be decimated. None of that would have happened if Trump had been there in the way that it did, but it's too late. Darn, if only we'd known. Wisconsin's overturned the drop boxes. You got all sorts of drama going on in Georgia and Arizona right now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Georgia, because we had drop boxes approved by the state election board in one of their meetings. They, just like Wisconsin, they did not have the power to do that. It must be decided by the legislature, which they did, but they didn't draw up a law for it until March of 21. Same thing as Wisconsin. Those drop boxes in 2020 were not sanctioned under law.
Well, and so we have lots and lots of things. I mean, look, Ted Cruz, the crux of the Brunson case, which, by the way, is not over, was that all those politicians who certified the vote with the electors coming forward, there was 150 Congress people, senators and legislators, who said we need to send the Electoral College vote people back to their states, and they need to verify that their vote count is correct and accurate and lawful before they're included in the national Electoral College vote. And so we need to take a 10-day pause, send them back, and have them verify what's going on before we do this certification of the national vote. And that's why you had a couple million people show up in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021. They weren't there to riot. They were there to address a grievance that this could not go forward on the vote because there was anomalies, there was problems, there was, something was wrong. And, the protesters were targeted, not the illegal votes. And so are we going to find out down the road that all of those people that showed up on January 6th were absolutely correct, and that the shenanigans, the frauds that occurred within the way the vote was being conducted and the theater of that day was in fact just that, somebody's artful theater, sleight of hand magic trick to stop the vote conveniently till they could get a handle on things and do it in the dark of night or something. So, that'll come out over time. But again, even there, what's the media's role in conditioning America, controlling the way we think and speak and talk? Robert Kennedy has filed suit against Google in Northern California. And the suit is about the fact that Google is censoring any of his talk, political talk, where it relates to vaccines and the shot and things like that. So he can't have an honest discussion with voters in an election season about an issue that is an election matter. We can only talk about certain things. That's like, that type of censorship abridges free speech. So, do they have the right, with their reach, their control, to stop certain parts of the conversation that we're having in the electorate? And that's what that lawsuit's about. Again, the media is a handmaiden to these globalists who seek to take control of the whole world, and to put America in its place, so that they can proceed with their plans worldwide.
There seems to be two. You mentioned how they've been censoring RFK Jr. There, there's been many, perhaps millions of folks censored in one way or another. A lot of folks are noticing that there seems to be a group of folks. Usually, there's been new players in that group that seem to be able to sneak through truths, and as they get them out, they become more and more widely followed. Examples are, Tucker Carlson coming out some months ago with information regarding the Kennedy assassination. Dr. Jan Halper Hayes coming out a few months ago talking about the Act of 1871 and its implications, and talking about the implications even on Biden's presidency. And it kind of struck me, and other people have asked about it. There seems to be this, I'll call it a group of truth tellers, but it's constantly changing, expanding, and seems to be an interesting way, perhaps, of getting past some of the censorship, because maybe some of the bad guys don't know who to censor, because where's the next truth coming from? What do you think?
Well, the fight's on. There have been platforms coming out that seek to bypass, some of the censoring that say is over at YouTube or Facebook or even Twitter and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how effective it's truly been so far, other than on private platforms. I will say, by the way, Tucker has a new platform coming out middle of December. I don't know that he's announced it exactly yet, but I'm not going to pull any, wind out of their sails, except to say that there is something new in the wings. I'm actually very excited about it for him. He's, think about this. He's got money back in his family from, some of the inheritance and all that. Had a beautiful education over at Heritage. Did what he did, over at Fox. But he's grown a tremendous amount over this period of time, and I think he's come of age also. And now he's talking very openly and broadly about some of these issues here in the country that are going on that have been, noise canceled out. We can't talk about them, the January 6th stuff. Because of his weight within the news media, he got away with a few things here and there, and at least got the word out. Give the guy credit. It's not a perfect world, and he's not king either, any more than Trump is king. So there's things that he may have liked to have done that he was held as much as was possible. He has pushed the edge of the envelope very hard, and you have to give the guy credit. And then he's seeking new ways. He's using the weight of his brand and other connections to try to create something new and better that can reach an audience outside of the other controls. There's a number of people doing that. There's something coming out of one of the other camps that I'm aware of that is, I think, going to have long legs. And I've talked with several of the board members, and that's really being announced even over the next week or so. So there's a number of groups and platforms coming out trying to return to a free speech and media thing in a world that has heavily censored media, and trying to get the truth out, which is great. But we also need to, where they're violating the laws, the case that applies, there was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was a company town. I think it was a mining town. And so a guy wants to go out and talk on a soapbox about unions and politics and all the other stuff. And he's in this thoroughfare within the mining town. And the owners of the mining town said, you can't do that. It's a company store and all the other stuff. And we own these streets and blah, blah, blah. And so you can only talk about things that we say are okay. Well, he took it up through the courts, and they said that was a common area that was a public space, and that while the mining company owned the town, or the company owned the town, that public space, that public area, was free under the Constitution for free speech purposes as a communication zone, and they couldn't choke off the conversation in that thoroughfare, in that open space, in that public space. And so he could talk about whatever he wanted to, even though he was in the parameters of the mining town. And that would apply to something like a Google, where, yes, they might have certain standards, et cetera. They got the company store and all the other connections. But in order to function in the internet today, it's virtually impossible to move freely without traveling on some of those roadways and highways that exist within the Google structure. And so, as part of their public presence within certain throughways, freeways, you have to allow open free speech on the soapbox. And the Google cannot censor and control that, for example, within the political realm, that they have a responsibility, public airwaves type of a thing, to allow free speech. And it's a First Amendment right. That's what's being challenged up there with what Kennedy's doing. And I think that they will ultimately win. Whether they win before the election or after is a different matter, or if the election happens on time.
Yeah. One of the things that folks have asked about is, and it goes back to even before Trump was elected. I may edit in an excerpt from the Al Smith dinner, which I bet you can remember that one, and some comments that he made about Hillary back then, and he inserted them in the middle of his little speech during dinner. People at the time, I think, thought, "Oh gosh, that's rhetoric," and some liked it and some didn't. Some thought it was similar to a mean tweet, if you will. But in the fullness of time now, people have found out that, yeah, gosh, what he was talking about was actually turned out to be very much correct. Some comments about, Hillary's book, Takes a Village. And I think his comment was, well, you should know in Haiti, she's taken several. And then we find out in following years that Laura Silsby, who was one of the people supposedly helping children in Haiti, get caught taking, I think, 30 plus children, or trying to remove them from
33
out of the country, and then was found to be, a confidant, and got an attorney funded from the Clintons and other things. So the reason I go there is because there's this perception that, gosh, sometimes the president has ways of saying things, and if you listen closely enough, you might be able to parse out certain things that mean more than you might imagine. We get so used over 50 years of listening to political rhetoric. Sometimes we don't pay attention when something's said that may mean more than just rhetoric. Have you found that to be the case?
Well, usually you have to. For example, just take some of the amazing speeches that were done by former presidents. Eisenhower in his parting speech talking about the military-industrial complex.
Yep.
Beware of it. Kennedy talking about secret societies and their various ways of controlling society, doing things behind the scenes inside our national city, our national house. David complained about it in the Bible, in Scripture. He talked about those who conspire against him within his own house, who have councils where they conspire against him in his own house. Um, uh, there's always the power behind the throne, the priests behind the throne. They're controlling the visible monarch, ruler. Goes back to Egypt, goes back to Samaria. Um, and this is a common theme. So that uh, when they're saying those words in a public way, yet you can read between the lines. Even Shakespeare, a lot of what he's talking about how rulers, people in positions of power and authority, are manipulated, and the strings are pulled by other hidden hands and forces arrayed against them right there in plain sight. You don't realize all the machinations behind the throne. You just see the visible person, and you don't realize how much more is going on right behind it, just out of sight. Just like the puppeteer, their strings might be visible, but you even ignore the strings. You know they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, your brain turns off to the strings. It even turns off to the fact that the puppet isn't doing the speaking. The voices are coming from a different place. They're caricatures of voice. The actions appear to be puppeteered, and you can see it, and yet you do a disconnect mentally.
Oops, did I lose you again, Juan? Oh, goodness, may have lost you again. You're frozen. You're still online, it appears, but I'm not hearing anything. We'll give it a couple of minutes and see what happens.
There,
there you go. You're back.
All right. I apologize. Yeah, I had an incoming
no
call. This particular platform doesn't allow me to screen out incoming calls, so it's kind of a pain because they will kick me off for a few seconds when they do. So
Yeah,
I
no worries.
apologize on that. So.
No worries. No worries. Let's see. Where were we going to go next? We were talking about the powers behind the puppet, if you will. So my guess is you probably would say that that's still continuing today. Is that a fair guess?
Oh, it's more intense than ever. That is in fact this moment that we're in, the contest between those that would control us from behind the scenes and their visible puppets versus the world as it should be, based on the Constitution, what people's actual desires are, who they voted, versus the illusion of who was put in office and their legitimacy, their authority. We're in that critical moment where the fight is on to return to leaders that are of the people, by the people, for the people, as opposed to those that are pro-offered into place, as though they are of the people, by the people, for the people, but they're not truly. They're just the anointed leaders, put there by hidden forces behind the scenes to do their bidding their way and make it look like it's the will of the people. Portray it that way through media and other things, and it just isn't. So, are we going to settle for this world of illusions, or are we going to hold for returning to a governance of people elected from the ranks of the citizenry, not mob members, bloodline family members, etc., all being pushed into positions of authority to tell us how we're going to live and how we're going to enjoy how we live. But it's really not the people's choice. It's somebody else's choice foisted upon us, forced upon us.
Yeah. With folks, in some cases, just now becoming aware of some of these ideas and so forth, what would your advice be for them in terms of being, I don't know, prepared or pushing back on this case where they're getting false information because it's coming from behind the curtain? How should they best be paying their attention, preparing themselves for whatever's coming next? Any thoughts there?
Well, if you live in Capone's Chicago, uh, right down through the police and the firemen and every civic service, even the business owners that are allowed to stay viable and survive, you're at risk because your health, your safety are at the whim and will of a mob, a cabal, who pick and choose how you're going to be allowed to function in your space. And when the corruption becomes great enough, then civil order begins to decay. Obviously, that was the intent in Ukraine. They were breaking down the uh, the things that allow society to occur, the policing. When Biden bragged about the fact that he was able to shut down the investigation by the prosecutors of criminality within their government and within businesses, uh, and the vice was allowed to continue, the moral authority, the moral order, the fabric of society was deconstructed. And that meant that the criminals got to hold power, stay there, and work with impunity, with no fear. The Capones, when they have no fear, they just get more and more vicious and tyrannical. And in reality, in America here, when the Constitution's not being followed, that's a type of tyranny. There was a tyranny over all of the states to force that abortion was the law of the land against the will of the people and against the Constitution. Was there a large percentage of people that wanted abortion? Yes. And they got to, say what they wanted to say. And anybody that was opposing, that had a different point of view, got shut down in the media, got strong opposition, got challenged in the courts, etc., for even having open free speech on the subject. The pendulum was weighted and swinging in a direction away from the Constitution. Uh, if you look at our country, in many ways, we're like the Donbass before Russia finally decided to come in and fight hard. The civil order had been being broken down. Foreign actors were coming in, putting in biolabs that were building out genetic um, uh, weapons aimed at Russia. And there's a certain point where Russia could no longer tolerate it. They went to the UN. They complained. They complained all over the world for a decade. They're doing stuff in these biolabs. What are these biolabs doing in the Ukraine? Why are they being allowed to have 56 biolabs here in the Ukraine, looking at genetics and bioweapons that can be targeted at the Russian people? Are we just supposed to just sit here? We can't do anything about it? The civil disorder, the mobs, the crime families, the political crime families able to operate with impunity in the Ukraine, and Russia can't do anything about it. They had Russian citizens in there in the Donbass that, large majority were Russian citizens living in that area, and they had that history going back, 1,000 years. So were they supposed to just sit there and take it? Are the American people just supposed to sit here and take it when the operations of government are being stolen away through fraudulent votes and put in the hands of these players. You know, there's a movie that was done just recently with Jack Nicholson. It's been out for like a decade, and it shows where it's kind of based loosely on Whitey Bulger and Whitey Bulger's, frauds out there in Boston like that, where he had this crime family, and they destroyed the lawful operation in the city. That he had people working for him in the police department, even in the FBI and other federal agencies. He's a paid informant for federal agencies. So, as a paid informant for those federal agencies, all he has to do is just tip somebody off, and he gets a pass for something else that he's doing. And so he was literally a licensed crime family in his own way. When you have the lawless in control and they don't have any fear, that's very dangerous. That's what's going on in America today. Should you feel safe with people that are untruthful and lying to you in positions of control in your government? I wouldn't be. And America's in that precipice moment. Are we going to go back to more lawful government screening and removing the criminals in office, or are we going to allow them to double down and put even more criminals in office through a continuing vote fraud? And that's the challenge for America today. The place you have to get rid of it is to vote them out. If you can't get an honest vote, you can't vote them out.
Yep, and then you're stuck. You're backed into a corner by their own system that they impressed upon you over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to spend a few minutes. I know people, as they hear you more, they're identifying with the things that you're covering. There's also some interesting stuff that you and Jennifer Mack have put together over the course of the last couple 3 years. I think I mentioned earlier, but if I didn't, I will now, that in this last week's broadcast, we aired The Called, which was a movie that that you two put together.
Yeah.
Is just at the beginning of 21, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Well, it was actually released on January 7th of 2021. It was released the day after everything that happened in the January 6th stuff in Washington, D.C. And of course, January 7th is 107 Day.
Yeah, there you go. How perfect. The
But, and by the way, the stuff that's in there, I, has stood the test of time. The things that we talk about, it's amazing. I think that will be something that we will remember many years after this has fallen to the side as some of the interesting things about how we got here. It's about the events leading up to January 6th, not just the ones in the days and weeks after the crooked vote in 2020, but also over the decades before, how America went off the rails. And the coup against America was perfected at the point that they were able to remove a president and put someone else in that suited their purposes better.
Yeah. So I'll include the link to go back and view that. I also want to include the link to the other work that you and Jennifer and your team are doing. You've actually got some pretty fun stuff for folks that want to feel more connected to this whole movement and so forth. If I can, I'm going to pull something up here. So one of the things that was fascinating was some of the things that you guys have created. I understand this is really Jennifer's creative side coming out is what I think you positioned it at, but it's actually a jacket with and let me jump to the image that's on here, the matador, and there's a number of things that you have now that bear this image, but once you just take a minute and describe it, it's got, the more detail you look, the more you find. It's fascinating.
Well, in fact, I did some presentations related to the Brunson brothers and other matters. There's 4 horns in a bullfight, and the four Brunson brothers with their horns in the Supreme Court case. And I'll be talking more about the latest situation on that Supreme Court case later in December. We're far from done there. In fact, we're coming to a new precipice right now, but I'll talk about that later.
Mhm.
But in a bullfight, there's four horns or trumpets. And at the fourth horn, there's left only 5 minutes in the bullfight, and the matador has to kill the bull in that 5 minutes. If the bull survives that final 5 minutes, then it's nursed back to health, and then it's used to breed other bulls, and it's considered a winner. And so the bulls that you see in the bullfight are primarily sired by bulls who have survived the ring and come back in their offspring to fight another day. What an amazing metaphor tied to the deep state. Okay, how many times have we said, "Oh, we got them. We've sorted it out. We've cleaned out the swamp. Blah blah blah," and they're back again, harder and fiercer than ever. Bulls used in the bullfight, they're bred away from people and raised away from people with the absolute minimum human contact possible. So when they show up in the bullfighting ring, they're pissed off. They're not happy. They don't want to be there, and they're pretty aggressive. The light of day to the deep state, they hate that, and yet what we have to do, it's one of the more recent things that just happened the other day using this imagery. President Trump had signed a jacket, and we sold a jacket in a print of this image. We call it the Matador, the charge. And of course, when I brought it out, that was when people were saying Trump's never going to be charged and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, he's going to be charged. He's going to be charged multiple times. And that, in fact, became what happened. And he's in the ring. He's single man combat coming up against this deep state bull. In the bullfight, the bull comes out initially with its head high and is prancing around. The toreadors weaken the bull about the neck and the shoulders, and it's related to the second oldest tale that's in the clay tablets going back to the Sumerian age, and that is the tale of Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh was this god-man king who, when the bull of heaven fell from heaven, which we call Taurus now, but when this bull of heaven fell to earth, it was rampaging around and destroying and killing. And Gilgamesh went out to do battle with it. And an enemy of Gilgamesh from another city came out and joined him in the battle to try and weaken the bull, and couldn't quite kill it. And then Gilgamesh finally was able to get control the situation. And the thing about a bull, they're not marathon runners. So they'll charge and they'll charge and they'll charge, but there's only so many charges in them strength-wise. And they run out of that strength. Just like with Ali absorbed all the blows of George Foreman. It was called rope-a-dope. And preserved the strength in his arms and the speed in his arms and protected him. And then when he finally came out of his rope-a-dope mode, just kind of dancing and prancing and letting Foreman punch himself out, wear himself out, Ali still had his speed and his strength. And then in the 8th round, he was able to come back and place very precise blows on Foreman and eventually knocked him down and won the fight. In this case, the bull charges and charges, and he's wearing himself down, but he's not a marathon runner. It can't go on forever. As the bullfight goes on, a lot of times a bull will literally sit down right out in the middle of the field, and the bullfighter has to beg him to charge him again. He'll get down on his own knees and beg the bull to charge. And then he rises up and he gets the bull worn out. What happens is, whereas the head was high when the bull first came into the fight. Its shoulders were locked together. You can't get a sword through the breastplate of the bull to the heart. You can't get a kill shot in to the bull through the shoulders and like that. And when its head is high, its shoulder blades are tied together. As the bull gets more tired, its head goes down lower and lower. And it also becomes far more dangerous for the bullfighter. When the head is down, the horns are down, it's charging, and then it's wielding its head around back and forth because it's so tired in the body that the only strength left is in its head with the horns, and it will gore a bullfighter in the legs. And usually bullfighters that die, it's because they get a broken femoral artery in the legs, and they'll be dead in under a minute. And many great bullfighters have been killed in the final minutes of a fight when the bull got a lucky shot in, got a horn over, and got it in. But to get the kill shot, the bullfighter has to be very close to the bull. And then he has to place the sword right between the shoulder blades, just to one side of the backbone. And he has to drive it all the way deep to the hilt in order to reach the heart and kill the bull. And so you'll see a bullfighter when he gets to that final moment where he's going to take the kill shot, leap in the air and place that sword and then drive it all the way to the hilt and put it to death once and for all. If you only wound it, the adrenaline gets going even harder and the bull can be more dangerous than ever. And the bullfighter, again, many great bullfighters went one fight too long and were killed in the bullfight. So Trump is out there on the field in the middle of this bullfight. We have these deep state players that have been there between elected governance going on for many, 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 many decades and decades and decades here in America. And as Roseanne said, Roseanne took this jacket that Trump had signed. We sold the print and the jacket at an auction at Mar-a-Lago for animal rescue for $27,500 donation. And but the jacket, before we gave it to the person that had purchased it, Roseanne showed it at this rally in Florida. And that's the video that's out there that's so fun. And that was a signed jacket by Trump. And she said, what I'd said in the auction, forget the bullshit. President Trump killed a bull. And so that was kind of this theme, and the crowd was just cheering on, forget the bullshit, no more bullshit. In fact, Roseanne, who ran for president back in like 2012 against Obama, being a comedian but serious too, one of her platform positions was outlaw bullshit.
That sounds like a pretty good platform,
Actually, I was thinking, that's actually a pretty good platform. Trump ought to think about adopting it.
So the jacket is one thing. You've also got other things. I just wanted, before we get too far down, I wanted to just make a mention of where folks can look at all the different stuff that you guys have produced. It's I think that's where most of it is, right? The jennifermack.com.
Yeah.
Correct.
And there is the coin. We haven't got it over at the Jennifer Mack. We've got it over at All Patriots at gumroad.com. And I think if you just punch in 107 and Gumroad store, you'll see we have a silver coin that's 100% silver, 99.99 or whatever silver of the Matador coin, and also Trump's picture when he was arrested. And that's very popular. It's limited because it's only there's a 2023 coin that will end at the end of the year, and that's we sold all of them that the mint had printed to date, and they're minting some more, but we won't get those for another several weeks. So there's a waiting list, but the people that order, if they want to order, they'll get the coin in 2023. Any of the orders for the end of the year will get some of those 2023 coins. We just won't receive them till later this month or early January. So anyway,
I'll make sure we
out there. Yeah, it's fun. It's a collector piece. It's very limited. It's cool.
Neat. I'll make sure we add that before we release the final version of the video here.
Yeah.
So, any last thoughts for folks as we get into the holiday season, or further into the holiday season, I should say?
Well, again, you're really looking at a situation where we're coming to the end of the beginning. We're coming into this period when we're going to actually see the anti-Russia, Russia stuff that we've talked about all the way along coming to a head right now. And that was something that people, were hoping and praying for, but they weren't really thinking was ever going to happen. Well, it's happening now. The people being arrested related to their false claims that Russia had somehow helped Trump to come into power in 2016. That is going to be shown to be what it was, a fraud. And many of those people are going to jail, some for the rest of their life.
Well, it'll be an interesting season for sure. We, you've granted us just a lot of time today, and we appreciate it. We hope to talk with you again soon as things progress, or as things emerge that are already here. We just don't see them quite yet, but very much appreciated, and wish you and the team and all of the president's team well, both now and as things progress in the future.
Well, the one thing I would say for people that everybody needs to take a deep breath and realize that as slow as it appears that things have gone getting to this point, you're talking about changing the whole world. You're talking about things that are so extensive that it's almost impossible for most people to grasp the magnitude of what has occurred to get us here, and even in the fight back to win back control of America. This is so big that you cannot, words don't convey just how big the fight truly is. And so don't be frustrated that it isn't already over yesterday or the day before. With stakes this big, you can't afford a single mistake. And so rather than going faster and risk a mistake, you have to go precisely, carefully, so that you don't risk the win over surging ahead foolishly at the wrong place, the wrong time, the wrong way. We're well advanced in where we're at right now within the country. It's all coming to a head, and we are going to win. And all of this bullshit is going to be ended, but not by scooping up the bullshit and just passing it around, but by killing the bull.
Yep. Thank you again, Juan. We hope to have you back soon, my brother.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.